Chapter 102. The Su family used to celebrate the Mid-Autumn Festival with Old Master Li every year. Old Master Li's name was Li Yongfeng. In Lin City, he was considered a man of his word. He had only married one wife, Gao Yue. After giving birth to Li Qianxue, his health began to deteriorate. Li Yongfeng loved his wife so much that he didn't let her have a second child. Li Qianxue was his only daughter. He raised Li Qianxue like a son. Li Qianxue was very diligent. She had never made him worry about anything since she was a child. The only difference was that 27 years ago, she fell in love with Su Qinghui, who was only a department manager in the Li family's company. Su Qinghui's family was ordinary. In his opinion, he was not good enough for his daughter. However, Li Qianxue was obsessed with him. His daughter liked him. After more than a year, Li Yongfeng finally agreed to be with her. However, he didn't expect that Su Qinghui would have an illegitimate daughter after less than a year of marriage. How could old Master Li not be angry? However, no matter how angry he was, the fact was that even if he didn't like Su Qingsang, he wouldn't make things difficult for her. The family he had chosen before, although the man had some minor problems and was too indecisive. But with Su Qingsang's personality, it wasn't inappropriate. Now seeing Su Qingsang walk in with Hua Jinyao, he had to admit Su Qingsang had good taste. This Hua Jinyao was probably not an ordinary person. Old master, dad, auntie. They were family, but Su Qingsang had been calling them by such strange names for more than 20 years. She had long been used to it. Hua Jinyao greeted them and gave them a gift. This time, Su Qingsang chose the gift. It wasn't expensive, but it was a gift for these people. Su Qingsang didn't know if it was an illusion, but she felt that Su Peijian was looking at her in a particularly unfriendly way today. She couldn't help but look at her. Su Peijian looked away from her. She was relieved. It might have been an illusion. She met Su Yusen's eyes and found that he was winking at her. Su Qingsang almost gave him a smile, but she held back. She nodded as a greeting. Old Master Li liked to play chess. Before Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao arrived, he was playing chess with Su Qinghui. Su Qinghui was no match for Old Master Li in chess. After a few rounds, they all lost. Dad's chess skills are superb. I am ashamed of my inferiority. If you could focus your mind on business on chess, you wouldn't lose to me. Old Master Li's words didn't sound pleasant, but Su Qinghui pretended not to hear it. He didn't know how to play chess. If it weren't for the fact that he wanted to make Old Master Li happy, he wouldn't have learned it. Old Master Li suddenly turned around and saw Hua Jinyao. You, come here. Hua Jinyao rubbed his nose and stood in front of Old Master Li. Can you play chess? A little. How about we play a game together? Captain Li's eyes lit up. He had his own channels. Recently, Lin City seemed to be much livelier than before. My pleasure. Hua Jinyao sat down. Su Qingsang glanced at him, not expecting him to know how to play chess. Her eyes became more inquisitive. Hua Jinyao always seemed to surprise her. Hua Jinyao picked up a black piece and looked at Old Master Li. The white piece goes first. Old Master, please. Chapter 103. Hua Jinyao didn't seem to notice it at all. He was focused on setting up the chess game. Su Qinghui knew a little about chess, and he was a little stunned when he looked at the chess game. Old Master Li was astute and good at making arrangements. Hua Jinyao's chess style was to deal with every move without fear. The two of them played back and forth. On the surface, it seemed that Old Master Li had the upper hand, but those who knew chess knew that Old Master Li would definitely lose this game. Li Qianxue came out after instructing the servants to pay attention to the dinner preparation. Gao Yue was a lady from a wealthy family, so she naturally dabbled in the four arts. She glanced at the chessboard and then looked at Hua Jinyao with a deeper meaning. Su Peijian had been staring at the chessboard. She turned her eyes and found that Su Qingsang and Su Yusen had disappeared. In the garden outside, Su Yusen and Su Qingsang stood behind an orange tree. She looked at her brother, Su Yusen, who was taller than her, and said softly, "Don't do something like this next time." "What is it?" "He asked me to come for the festival." Su Qingsang sighed in her heart. "Auntie won't like to see me." "I know." Su Yusen waved his hand and didn't care. "But you are a family with us. How can we not spend the festival together?" Su Qingsang felt a little gratified and a little bitter. Su Yusen was a young man with a simple mind. It was really much simpler to get along with each other. "I thank you. But I really think it's good. You see, I'm married anyway, and I won't be alone for the festival in the future. So it doesn't matter. Is he good to you?" Su Yusen didn't have much contact with Hu Jinyao, so he didn't care before. Now that he owed Su Qingsang a favor, he paid more attention to her marriage. "Pretty good." Su Qingsang looked at Su Yusen's adult face and found it a little funny. "Okay, don't worry about me. How is Xiaobai?" "It's okay." Su Yusen was still a little uncomfortable. "I wanted to help her ask for leave. It just so happened that it's a holiday. She's resting at home now." "That's good." The little girl was still young, so it wouldn't affect her too much. "But you, Yusen." The sudden voice made Su Qingsang and Su Yusen turn their faces at the same time. One of them was talking about Bai Jihan, and she looked a little guilty. The other one didn't want Su Peijian to hear about Bai Jihan, so she looked a little awkward. Su Peijian looked at the strange expressions on their faces. What Luo Meishan had told her before seemed to have become true. She took a few steps forward and stood in front of the two of them. The corners of Su Peijian's lips curled up into a faint smile. "Yusen, what are you talking about here? You're so engrossed in it that you're not even going to talk about it inside?" "Nothing," Su Yusen interrupted Su Peijian. "We were just having a casual chat." "Oh? Have a casual chat? What do you want to talk about?" Su Peijian turned to look at Su Qingsang. Her gaze was like an X-ray. "I didn't know that you had something to talk about with a student like Yusen." Su Qingsang didn't like Su Peijian's aggressive tone, nor did she like her attitude. "It's nothing." The old man was playing chess inside. "We were too lazy to watch, so we came out for a walk. Let's go in now." After saying this, she glanced at Su Yusen again, signaling him to stop talking. The more he said, the more mistakes he would make. It was better not to say anything. However, this expression confirmed Su Peijian's guess. For a moment, her expression became more and more unsightly. Chapter 104. Nothing, just a casual chat. After all, Su Yusen was only a 17-year-old boy. He tried his best to act as if nothing had happened, but Su Peijian could still tell that something was wrong. "What do you mean by casual chat? Yusen, be honest. What secret do you have with Su Qingsang that I can't know? Why are you being so mysterious?" "What's so mysterious?" Su Yusen didn't like to hear that. "No matter what, she's my daughter, right? We're sister and brother. What's wrong with a chat?" "Sister and brother?" Su Peijian's face darkened. Su Qingsang was an illegitimate daughter. Raising her was already a great blessing. What right did she have to call Su Yusen sister and brother? Isn't that right? Su Yusen looked at his sister's face and didn't want to say more. "Okay, I got it. I'll go in now." Su Peijian had never treated her younger brother like this before. Her breath was stuck in her throat, and she felt very uncomfortable. She was the daughter of heaven. Her parents loved her, and everyone around her adored her. Even Su Yusen had to be a stone's throw away from her parents. This was the first time Su Yusen had spoken to her in such an impatient tone. How could Su Peijian bear it? While eating, Su Qingsang found that Su Peijian looked at her from time to time. She was a little confused. She thought of her conversation with Su Yusun in the garden. Su Peijian must have suspected something. Here, honey, eat this. Hua Jinyao picked up a piece of fish and put it in Su Qingsang's bowl. She turned around and Hua Jinyao was smiling brightly at her, showing his white teeth. When she turned her head again, she found that the Su family's eyes were on her. She felt more and more uncomfortable. Okay, I can eat it myself. This beef is good too. Hua Jinyao picked up another piece of food for her as if he couldn't feel other people's gazes. Enough. I can take it. Su Qingsang hurriedly stopped him. This person was really too much. Couldn't he look at the situation? I know you can. But I like to take food for you. Hua Jinyao said it with a calm face, as if taking food for her was something that made him happy. Su Qingsang's heart warmed when she met his eyes. She didn't feel comfortable staying in the Su family. Naturally, she didn't dare to reveal her preferences or anything else. All these years, whenever she ate with the Su family, she would only eat the dishes in front of her. For so many years, no one had noticed what she was doing. She didn't expect that Hua Jinyao would notice it after sitting beside her for a while. Su Peijian's face darkened. In the past, Qiu Yanba would also come to celebrate the festival. However, he had gone on a business trip these few days. Not to mention having a reunion dinner with them, even their enemies were not present. Seeing Hua Jinyao being so attentive to Su Qingsang, the only thought in her mind was that the two of them were deliberately showing off their affection. Another thing was that he was more guarded against Su Qingsang. Hua Jinyao didn't know Su Qingsang well before, but he cared about her so much. Now it seemed that she had really underestimated her good sister in the past. Not only Su Peijian, but Old Master Li and the others also had different expressions on their faces. Especially Old Master Li. He had been in power for a long time and had dealt with Hua Mingguang of Rong City. According to the information he had received, Hua Jinyao should be Hua Mingguang's son. Not only did he hide his identity and hide in this small Lin city, but he also suddenly married his cheap granddaughter. Chapter 105. Thinking of Hua Jinyao's playing style, Old Master Li's brows knitted together again. Honey, have some soup. Unlike the others who were either sizing him up or looking at him with inquisitive eyes, Hua Jinyao was much more at ease. She didn't know what he was thinking. One moment, he was putting food into Su Qingsang's bowl, and the next moment, he was pouring soup for her. Su Qingsang felt very uncomfortable, but Hua Jinyao didn't care about how others looked at him. In the end, Su Qingsang simply pretended that she didn't see it and didn't care about other people's gazes. Su Peijian felt that the two of them were very intimate. She subconsciously glanced at Su Yusun again. Seeing that he seemed relieved because of Hua Jinyao's action, she became more and more anxious. Just like that, the meal ended with everyone having different thoughts. After dinner, they were supposed to admire the moon together, but the weather wasn't good today. Although it wasn't raining, the sky was filled with dark clouds. Not even the shadow of the moon could be seen. Seeing that, Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao stood up together and said goodbye. Old Master Li glanced at Su Chenghui and gestured for him to follow him to the study. Su Yusun went back to his room. Su Peijian stepped forward, hooked her arm around Li Qinshue's, and gestured for her to follow her to the garden outside to admire the moon. Admire the moon? There's no moon. I saw it coming out. Mom, come here. Su Peijian didn't care. She dragged Li Qianxue outside and sat down on the swing in the garden. It was very quiet at this moment. The servant left after serving the refreshments and tea. Only then did Su Peijian tell Li Qianxue what she had discovered. Is that so? Li Qianxue's brows furrowed. She was over 40 years old, but she looked like she was in her early 30s. Her face was stern. Are you sure? Of course I'm sure. Su Peijian was furious at the thought of Su Yusun's behavior. My brother has been obedient since he was young. He didn't care about Su Qingsang at all. Why did the two of them get involved when she got married? This is too strange. Mom. Su Peijian held Li Qianshue's arm and said, "We raised her for more than 20 years. We thought she was easy to deal with. Who would have thought that it would nurture her ambition? What an ingrate. You don't have to worry about this for now." Li Qianxue thought about the information she had received. I've been watching him for so many years. He didn't cause any trouble. There's no reason I can't catch her now. Mom, of course I believe you, but Yusen, you're just a kid. What do you know? A cold glint flashed across Li Qianshue's eyes. When the college entrance examination is over, no matter which school he gets into, let him study abroad. As for Su Qingsang, Li Qianxue didn't do anything to Su Qingsang before because she didn't think it was necessary. However, if Su Qingsang acted recklessly and offended her, she would not be polite. All right. Li Qianxue patted Su Peijian's hand. You don't have to worry about these things. You are about to get engaged to Yanba. Your dad and I are keeping an eye on the company. You should spend more time with Yanba. Mom, don't worry. Yanba is not like those people outside. Yes. Li Qianxue returned to her room. Su Qinghui had just finished talking with old Master Li and returned to his room. Seeing Li Qianxue enter the door, he acted as if he didn't see her. He took his pajamas and was about to enter the bathroom. Chapter 106. Su Qinghui looked at Li Qianshue's face. The usual gentleness and elegance on his face was gone. The expression on his face was colder than ever before. What does Dad want to talk to me about? Can't you go ask Dad? I'm asking you now, what's your attitude? Li Qianxue was furious when she saw him like this. Is this how you talk to your wife? I've always been like this. Didn't you already know that? Su Qinghui was nearly 50 years old, but because of his good looks, he looked like he was 40. He had a good reputation outside, whether it was his business methods or his character. But that was only in front of outsiders. Li Qianshue's chest heaved violently. Yes, she already knew. He knew it 26 years ago. Su Qinghui, let me remind you that I gave you everything you have now. Thank you for reminding me. Su Qinghui's expression was cold. I don't mind if you want to take it back. Su Qinghui. His indifferent tone successfully hurt Li Qianxue. Get out of my way. Su Qinghui didn't seem to notice Li Qianshue's expression. He walked past her and headed for the bathroom. Li Qianxue tried her best to restrain herself, but she couldn't help it. Su Qinghui, I'm telling you, I won't take it back. Don't even think about divorcing me. In this life, even if I die. Don't ever think about being with that woman. Su Qinghui stopped in his tracks. He turned around and looked at Li Qianxue. Let me tell you, you can only be Mrs. Su in this life. Li Qianxue watched Su Qinghui enter the bathroom. She heard the truth that she had known for a long time, and her heart was filled with not only resentment, anger, but also sadness. Yes, who would know that the eldest miss of the Li family was so arrogant? Li Qianxue, who had been loved by everyone, was living a married life with Su Qinghui in name only. Su Peijian got pregnant with Su Peijian through some tricks. Su Yusen happened to be Su Qinghui when he was drunk. Except for those 2 times, Su Qinghui didn't even bother to touch her. For more than 20 years, they had slept on the same bed, but it was as if they were strangers. All of this was because of that woman. Because that woman was no longer in Lin City. However, that woman's daughter was still an eyesore to her from time to time. Thinking about Su Peijian's words, thinking about how that woman had been stuck between her and Su Qinghui for more than 20 years, Su Qingsang. Don't blame me if it's you. If you want to blame someone, blame that shameless mother of yours. She gave birth to you, but she didn't care about you and left you behind. Just take it as paying off your mother's debt. When Su Qingsang got home, she found that the dark clouds had dispersed. She happily ran to the balcony and looked at the moon outside in a daze. Hua Jinyao went into the kitchen and poured a glass of water. He came out and put the water in her hand. Thank you. It would take an hour to get back from the Su family, and she was a little thirsty. Hua Jinyao looked at her profile in the moonlight and put his arms around her waist. Su Qingsang didn't look back. The atmosphere was tense, and she didn't want to break it. The moon is so round today. Really? Hua Jinyao glanced at the sky. Isn't it the same every year? Yes. The moon is the same every year. But people were different. Chapter 107. As he said this, Hua Jinyao narrowed his eyes. No. Who could bully her? No. Who had the time to bully her? For the Su family, although her existence made them a little uncomfortable, they were all from the upper class after all. They cared about their reputation, so why would they lower their status to make things difficult for an illegitimate daughter like her? I think Su Peijian is quite unfriendly to you. Her? Su Qingsang smiled. She doesn't like me, but she won't make things difficult for me. Hua Jinyao put his arm around her waist and turned her body around. Did you have a hard time in the Su family? He asked. Su Qingsang looked at the concern in his eyes and suddenly smiled. What? You don't think I'm a Cinderella who was abused by a stepmother, do you? Aren't you? Of course not. Su Qingsang shook her head. At most, they would ignore me. It's okay. I won't ignore you. Hua Jinyao kissed her hard on the cheek as he spoke. I can't ignore you no matter where you are. What a glib tongue. Su Qingsang didn't believe his words at all. How long had they known each other? How long had they been together? However, today was the Mid-Autumn Festival. She was still a little touched by his words. I don't believe you. How could Hua Jinyao not see it? I believe you. Thank you for thinking so highly of me. Although he said that, his expression was completely different. Are you thanking me? Hua Jinyao lowered his voice and pressed his forehead against hers. What do you want? He looked like he was up to no good. Su Qingsang instinctively wanted to escape. It's too insincere to just say thank you. Hua Jinyao picked her up. Why don't you show it with some practical actions? Hua Jinyao. She was just being polite. How could she say that? Hua Jinyao had already carried her into the room. The moment her body was placed on the bed, Su Qingsang whispered. The curtains are open. It's okay. No, it's not okay. We live high up, and there's no one across the street. But, look, the moonlight outside is so beautiful. Won't it be romantic under this kind of atmosphere? Hua Jinyao. With the curtains closed, she felt insecure. Hua Jinyao covered her mouth with his, then moved his lips to her ear. Don't worry. No one can see it. Su Qingsang gritted her teeth and couldn't say a word. Hua Jinyao whispered into her ear, look at the beauty under the moonlight. The more he looked at her, the more beautiful she became. Wife. Why don't you try on all the pajamas I bought for you? Su Qingsang's face instantly turned as red as a cooked shrimp. I don't want, wife. Just satisfy me. Hua Jinyao gently kissed her earlobe and coaxed her in a low voice. Su Qingsang turned her face away and decided not to talk to this guy anymore. Hua Jinyao looked at He Xiankai, who was standing in front of him. He Xianyao had come to visit with him today. In just a few days, He Xiankai and He Xianyao had come up with a new proposal. This speed was very fast, but he didn't know if the quality was as good. He Xianyao looked at Hua Jinyao. It seemed that the pain of being despised by him was still there. This time, she had made up her mind to get back at him. Jinyao, you're so busy. It's so hard to see you. Chapter 108. You are too polite, Jinyao. He Xiankai had a faint smile on his face. If your place is a small temple, then my He family is a local temple. Hua Jinyao raised his eyebrows and said with a teasing tone, so you're saying that you're here to burn incense? Yes. He Xiankai didn't deny it. Jinyao won't refuse, will he? Of course. Everyone makes money. Don't you think so? I like how straightforward you are. He Xiankai looked at He Xianyao, who had been silent, and said softly, Xianyao, introduce our plan. Okay. He Xianyao was full of confidence. She stood up and was about to introduce, Miss He, wait a minute. He called He Xiankai by his name, but called He Xianyao Miss He. It was easy to tell who was close. He Xuanyao's face suddenly darkened because of the way he addressed her. Brother Jinyao. Seeing the coldness in Hua Jinyao's eyes, she changed the way she addressed him. President Hua, this doesn't seem very nice. No. I just don't think I know Miss He that well. Hua Jinyao was willing to give He Xiankai face because he was a business rival. At least, Hua Jinyao admired his methods. But He Xianyao? Sorry, I just wanted to ask if the plan you sent this time is different from the one you sent last time. If not, you don't need to introduce it. Jinyao? If He Xiankai still couldn't sense that Hua Jinyao was picking on his sister, he would have been a fool. Xianyao is just a child. Why do you have to be so serious? Child? Hua Jinyao nodded. If she is a child, then there is no need to talk business. Isn't it better to go home and drink milk? Hua Jinyao. He Xianyao had never been humiliated like this before. She stood up immediately and was about to lose her temper. He Xiankai grabbed her arm and pressed her body down to stop her from moving. Xianyao, sit down. Brother, look at him. She was the daughter of the He family. How could Hua Jinyao humiliate her like this? It was too much. Jinyao. He Xiankai managed to maintain his good manners. The He family and the Hua family often cooperate. Isn't it inappropriate for you to do this? You said she was a child. Since I'm a kid, I naturally have to do things that only kids do. He Xiankai nodded. He finally understood. Xianyao is still young. Sometimes she doesn't speak thoughtfully. So please forgive me. But this time, it's not just our entire planning team, I'm also part of it. I'm sure you'll be satisfied. Xiankai, I'm naturally satisfied with your abilities. Hua Jinyao picked up the proposal and said, but no matter what, I have to have a meeting with the board of directors before I can make a decision. Don't you agree? Of course. He Xiankai left the contract and stood up. He Xianyao still wanted to say something, but when she met her brother's eyes, she could only nod. We'll be leaving first. He Xuankai's footsteps suddenly stopped. Right, I invited a few leaders to dinner tonight. Since Jinyao is starting to develop in Lin City now, why don't we go together? Of course. Hua Jinyao looked at He Xiankai and nodded. The two He siblings looked at each other and smiled. He Xianyao, in particular, had a flash of excitement and expectation in her eyes. Chapter 109. The He siblings decided to have their meal at Lin Yuan Pavilion. It was a very famous private restaurant in Lin City. When Hua Jinyao entered the private room, other than the He siblings, Li Junsheng was also there. Li Junsheng. He grew up with Hua Jinyao in Rong City. They were childhood friends. Unlike Hua Jinyao, who chose to go into business, Li Junsheng had been very clear about his goal since he was young. Not long after graduation, he embarked on the path of righteousness. At a young age, he became the deputy mayor. He knew that he had been transferred, but he didn't expect Li Junsheng to be transferred to Lin City. Jinyao. Li Junsheng saw Hua Jinyao enter the door and stood up first. I heard that Xiankai invited you to dinner today, but I didn't believe it. I didn't expect you to really come. That's because I knew you were here. I have to give face to others, but I have to give face to you. Hua Jinyao said courteously, but his words weren't polite at all. After shaking hands with Li Junsheng, he directly punched him on the shoulder. Keep bragging. You really give me face. I've been in Lin City for so long. Why didn't you contact me? You've wronged me. I really didn't know you came to Lin City. Hua Jinyao patted him on the shoulder. Did you get promoted again? Cousin is now the mayor of Lin City, Yi Xianyao said at this time, her tone extremely intimate. Li Junsheng's aunt, Li Wanxiang, married into the He family and was the mother of He Xiankai and his sister. Li Junsheng was indeed cousins with the two siblings who had returned home. Not bad. Hua Jinyao had always known that Li Junsheng was ambitious, but it was also impressive for him to sit in this position at such a young age. Li Junsheng smiled. He didn't need to be polite with Hua Jinyao. The group sat down. Not long after, two more people came, both from the relevant departments. Hua Jinyao originally wanted to see what the He siblings were up to. Now he felt that he was a little narrow-minded. The Hua family and the He family were separated by a layer. However, the Hua family and the Li family were real friends. He, Li Junsheng, and 6 other people in Rong City had always been called the 7 young masters of Rong City. Naturally, their relationship was not ordinary. After 3 rounds of drinking, Li Junsheng patted Hua Jinyao on the shoulder. The two of them were very familiar with each other. They could understand each other's intentions with just a glance. Taking the opportunity to smoke outside, Li Junsheng and Hua Jinyao walked to a corner. Li Junsheng took out a pack of cigarettes, took out a cigarette, and handed it to Hua Jinyao. Still not playing? That's not it. Hua Jinyao didn't smoke. You didn't come here just to catch up with me, did you? You. Li Junsheng smiled. I came here today for a mission. What mission? The first mission is naturally to help Xian Kai speak up for him. You guys have been working with the He family for a long time. Why are you making things difficult for him this time? He Xiankai and his sister were Li Junsheng's cousins. However, in Li Junsheng's heart, he was still closer to Hua Jinyao. No matter what, they were still relatives. Those who wanted to help would naturally do so. I'm fine. It's just that I think they don't know what's important. Can't tell what's important? What do you mean? When I didn't want Rome City, your cousin made a big move. He had looked for Hua Yifan several times. Tell me, should I argue with him? Hua Jinyao's voice was indifferent, but this sentence made Li Junsheng understand what he meant. Chapter 110. Li Junsheng knew what was going on and didn't try to persuade him anymore. Just pretend I didn't say anything. But you have to give her a chance. It's okay. Hua Jinyao smiled. For your sake, I'll let bygones be bygones. You. After that, Li Junsheng thought of something else. There's one more thing. I didn't want to say it. Then don't say it. Hua Jinyao didn't give him any face. You. Li Junsheng wanted to punch him. You don't want me to say it, so I'll say it. This cousin of mine, stop. Hua Jinyao interrupted him. I'm married. No way. Really? Li Junsheng was shocked. You're not lying to me because you don't want to be with my cousin, are you? Li Junsheng knew that Hua Jinyao had no feelings for He Xianyao. However, Li Wanxiang was his aunt, and she was his biological aunt. When she asked him to rub it, she only said that she wanted him to try it. He had to say it. But he didn't expect it. Hua Jinyao was married? Yes. I'm married. So suddenly? Which celestial being could make young Master Hua fall in love with her and jump into the grave of marriage? You said it's a fairy. Of course it's a fairy. Thinking of Su Qingsang, Hua Jinyao's expression softened. Li Junsheng looked at him as if he was an alien, but he finally accepted the truth. Okay. It seems you found the woman of your dreams. In that case, I won't say anything about my cousin. Find a chance next time and bring her out. I'll meet her. Okay. Hu Jinyao agreed quickly, but he suddenly thought of something. Li Junsheng was the mayor of Lin City now. If he introduced him to Su Qingsang, how could he explain that he and the mayor were childhood friends? What's wrong? Nothing. Hu Jinyao shook his head. He finally had a headache. Su Qingsang didn't know his identity, so he believed everything he said. But he seemed to have told too many lies, one after another. If Su Qingsang found out in the future, when Hu Jinyao returned to the private room, he couldn't help but look worried. Right now, he had to think carefully about how to smooth things over with Su Qingsang. Unfortunately, He Xiankai and the others couldn't see the change in his emotions. Especially He Xianyao. She thought that her cousin could persuade Hu Jinyao. She was waiting to have sex with Hu Jinyao tonight. She was so happy that she gestured for her brother to toast Hu Jinyao from time to time. Li Junsheng got married because of Hu Jinyao, and he was transferred to Lin City, so he would be with Hu Jinyao again. He also drank a few more cups. Since the mayor had already started drinking, the remaining few naturally didn't want to be left behind. As a result, a group of people took turns toasting Hu Jinyao. At that moment, Hu Jinyao was wondering if Su Qingsang would be angry after finding out about the true would I. After a while, he got drunk. Seeing that Hu Jinyao was drunk, He Xuanyao's eyes lit up. When the group of people was almost drunk, she followed her brother, who was relatively sober, to support Hu Jinyao. As for her cousin, he still had some sense. He called a waiter to send him upstairs to rest. Chapter 111. He Xianyao and He Xiankai helped Hu Jinyao, who was drunk, to his room upstairs. I can still drink. Hu Jinyao's vision blurred. Mixing a few kinds of alcohol was the most intoxicating. He patted He Xuankai's shoulder. Junsheng, come. Drink more. I haven't congratulated you yet. You're drunk. Let me help you to the bed. He Xiankai couldn't say much now. He was afraid that Hu Jinyao would react if he said too much. I'm not drunk. I'm really not drunk. Hu Jinyao waved his hand and began to walk backward. How can this little amount of alcohol make me drunk? You're really drunk. Drunk? I'm not drunk. Hu Jinyao waved his hand, but his body softened and he fell forward. He Xiankai hurriedly helped Hu Jinyao to the bed. He Xianyao helped. First, she took off Hu Jinyao's shoes, and then, brother, you can go out now. Xianyao. You. Brother, just go out. I know what I'm doing. He Xiankai stood still and looked at Hu Jinyao, who closed his eyes as soon as he touched the bed. He was obviously dead drunk. He turned to look at his sister. Xianyao, do you really want to do this? He's already married. Brother. It's not like you didn't see how he treated me during the day. He Xianyao bit her lip. Her beautiful face was full of grievance. If I don't do this, when will Hu Jinyao ever see me? But if you do this, he won't see you. He Xiankai was a man. Did a man love a woman? Did he have feelings for her? The look in his eyes couldn't lie. If he doesn't see me, then I'll find a way to make him see me. He Xianyao pushed He Xiankai. All right, you can go out now. He Xiankai was helpless. He had thought that his sister wanted to take advantage of the plan to accept Hu Jinyao. He Xianyao had a good idea. She wanted Hu Jinyao to see her ability and find out that she was the most suitable person for him. She didn't expect that Hu Jinyao wouldn't give her any face. There were a few times when they talked about cooperation, but he chased her away before she could even finish her sentence. How could He Xianyao, who had always been proud and had never been taken advantage of, endure such humiliation? She couldn't take this lying down, so she came up with this trick. He Xiankai knew it wasn't good for his sister to be like this, but he couldn't overcome He Xuanyao's stubbornness. He Xianyao chased her brother away. Her eyes were full of love as she looked at Hua Jinyao, who was sleeping soundly on the bed. Brother Jinyao, after today, you'll be mine. As she spoke, she began to take off Hua Jinyao's clothes without any shyness. Hua Jinyao was there to entertain guests, so he was dressed very formally. Suit, shirt. He Xianyao rarely did things like this, so her movements were a bit rusty. It took her a long time to remove Hua Jinyao's suit jacket. At that moment, the phone in Hua Jinyao's pocket rang. He Xianyao was startled by the ringtone. Seeing that Hua Jinyao didn't wake up, she quickly took out her phone. The word wife on the screen almost pierced He Xuanyao's eyes. Wife, wife. The position of wife was supposed to be hers. But it was taken away by an illegitimate daughter who couldn't be seen in public. How could she not be angry? How could she not hate? Her eyes were full of anger as she stared at the screen. She held the phone and was about to hang up when she suddenly changed her mind. Chapter 112. Su Qingsang received a call from Hua Jinyao when she got off work that day. He said that he had a business meeting today and wouldn't pick her up. He asked her to go home by herself. She was about to leave, but the patient with PIH that she had picked up earlier started to move. She was the first doctor to receive the patient, so she naturally went into the operating room with Zhang Chubai. When the operation was over, she looked at the time and found that it was getting late. She remembered that Hua Jinyao said that he had a business meeting. Su Qingsang wanted to see if he was done. If not, he would come and pick her up. She didn't know where Hua Jinyao worked, but she knew that it wouldn't be too far from the hospital. The place wouldn't be too far from his company, would it? The phone was connected, but a woman's voice came from the other side. Ah. Yes. Jinyao, you're great, yes. Ah. Be gentle. Be gentle. Su Qingsang was stunned by the sudden voice. She blinked her eyes and thought for a moment that she had called the wrong number. She took the phone away from her ear and looked at it again. It was indeed Hua Jinyao. The name she saved was Dear Husband. Hua Jinyao took her phone and changed this name, which made her feel nauseous. Su Qingsang pressed the speakerphone, and the voice on the other side of the phone became louder. Ah, yes, Jinyao, be gentle, be gentle. Jinyao. It's me. Ah. The sound of lingered on. Su Qingsang's expression changed slightly. After listening for a while, her expression suddenly changed. Hua Jinyao? She called, but there was no response. The voice on the other side of the phone seemed to have stopped. Su Qingsang knew what was going on and called again, Hua Jinyao. There was still no response. Su Qingsang stood up. Who are you? Why do you have Jinyao's phone? Hearing the heavy breathing on the other side of the phone, Su Qingsang sneered. Let Hua Jinyao answer the phone. What? You have time to sleep with a woman of unknown origin, but you don't have time to answer the phone call of your legal wife? Hua Jinyao, answer the phone. Su Qingsang's voice was a few decibels higher than before. On the other side of the phone, the screams were even more exaggerated than before. Soon after, the call was hung up. Su Qingsang sneered and stared at the phone that had already been hung up. For the first time, a cold expression flashed across her beautiful face. While typing on the screen, Su Qingsang quickly picked up her bag and keys and went out. While waiting for the elevator, she bumped into Sister Wang, who lived next door. Su Qingsang didn't even have time to greet her before she directly entered the elevator and pressed the button for the first floor. She called Shi Mengwan as she walked. She didn't have many friends. They were either doctors or nurses. However, Shi Mengwan knew 2 police officers. Su Qingsang found Hua Jinyao's location according to the GPS and asked the waiter to open the door under the pressure of the police. What she saw was Hua Jinyao sleeping on the hotel bed, unconscious. Only his upper body was barely covered. There was also the woman he had seen once before. At this moment, he was pulling the quilt up to cover his body, looking at her with a smug and provocative expression. Clothes were scattered all over the ground, and there was a faint smell of alcohol in the air. Taking a deep breath, Su Qingsang turned around and smiled at Shi Mengwan's 2 police officers. "Thank you for today. He has been found. Thank you for making this trip." "You're welcome." The 2 police officers had a good relationship with Shi Mengwan. They were happy to help with this kind of small favor. Su Qingsang thanked them and watched them leave. Only then did she turn around and face everything in the room. Chapter 113. It was He Xuanyao's first time doing something like this. She was a little nervous, but she was more excited. In her opinion, a woman like Su Qingsang was no match for her. Inside and out, there was no place that could compare to hers. She was just too nervous. She didn't expect that Su Qingsang would see through her purposeful voice. Frightened, she quickly hung up the phone, but after hanging up the phone, she felt that something was wrong. Why was she nervous? Why was she scared? Hua Jinyao was lying in the same bed as her. She only needed to wait until tomorrow, and He Xiankai would come in with his men. If someone found out that Hua Jinyao was sleeping with her, it would be impossible for him not to take responsibility for her. But she didn't expect that Su Qingsang would come to the hotel directly and ask a waiter to open the door for her. He Xianyao didn't expect that either, so she didn't have time to stop her. No, she couldn't stop her. After all, she was in a sorry state right now. But when Su Qingsang closed the door, she had calmed down. "What are you doing here?" Even though she was nervous, He Xianyao tried to look calm. "Do you know that I can call the police if you barge in like this?" "You want to call the police?" Su Qingsang smiled. "The 2 people who just left are policemen. Do you want me to call them back for you?" He Xianyao didn't look happy, but she was sure that Su Qingsang was lying. "Jinyao is asleep. If you don't have anything else, please leave. Jinyao is my husband. Why should I leave?" Su Qingsang put her bag on the table next to the hotel and looked calm. "Jinyao doesn't want you anymore. If you're smart, get out of here." He Xianyao said it with such confidence that Su Qingsang almost laughed. She really laughed and walked towards the bed as she laughed. The expression on her face was so strange that He Xianyao couldn't figure out what she wanted to do. What do you want?" "You said that Jinyao doesn't want me anymore?" "Of course," He Xianyao said matter-of-factly. "Jinyao just said that he was blind in the past. He doesn't know what's good for him. I'm the one that he's most satisfied with, and you're nothing more than someone who can't even be put on the table. He's just using you as a distraction." "Oh? Really?" "Of course." He Xianyao said, "Jinyao said you're like a dead fish in bed. You can't satisfy him at all. I'm his favorite." Me what?" "Say it. Why aren't you saying anything?" Su Qingsang stood by the bed and looked at He Xianyao. She looked nervous, guilty, and scared. Held out his hand to her. "One." "Ah," He Xianyao screamed, but she didn't have time to stop her. The quilt on her slid down. "You crazy woman, you." Su Qingsang didn't even look at her but glanced at Hua Jinyao. His clothes had been stripped by He Xianyao. He was drunk, so he was lying on the bed unconscious. Su Qingsang glanced at it and suddenly laughed. She turned to look at He Xianyao. "You said that Jinyao is very satisfied with you?" Of course. Is this how I am satisfied with you?" Chapter 114. Sneering, Su Qingsang straightened up and casually covered Hua Jinyao with the quilt. After the examination, his body was hers. She didn't want other women to see it. When did she have this idea? Su Qingsang didn't want to think about it now. There were more important things to do. Although He Xianyao didn't have much experience, She wasn't a naive girl. She immediately understood what Su Qingsang meant. She blushed and said, "You're shameless." "Who's shameless?" Su Qingsang crossed her arms in front of her chest and glanced at He Xianyao. "You took off your clothes and slept with a man. He's already dead drunk and has no reaction at all, yet you can still scream so loudly as if you're being raped. Who do you think is shameless?" She was good-tempered and didn't want to argue with others. But that didn't mean she was stupid. He Xuanyao's idea was good. But her acting was so bad that she didn't feel any sense of accomplishment even if she saw through it. You. He Xianyao was from a big family, so she didn't know how to curse. But Su Qingsang's words made her unable to fight back. "Me what?" Su Qingsang glanced at He Jinyao. "You don't even know what he looks like in bed, and you're making a scene in front of me?" She thought of He Jinyao's usual nonsense in bed, as well as his outrageous thoughts. Su Qingsang blushed a little. She didn't really ask He Jinyao to have sex with her. How would she know what he looked like in bed? "You what?" Su Qingsang wasn't in the mood to continue acting. "You can't even continue acting." "What? Why aren't you leaving?" "Why should I leave?" He Xuanyao's neck was red. She looked embarrassed, but she refused to admit defeat. "He Jinyao had sex with me just now. He has to be responsible for me. I'm not leaving." "Are you sure?" "Of course." He Xianyao couldn't help but sound guilty. But she wouldn't let it go like this. Su Qingsang nodded to show that she understood. "Are you sure you want He Jinyao to be responsible for you?" "What else? Is he going to deny it?" He Xianyao had never been so stubborn. Even if she had a guilty conscience now. But why should she admit defeat in front of an illegitimate daughter who couldn't even be seen in public? "All right. Not bad." Su Qingsang nodded to show that she understood. He took out his phone and glanced at He Xianyao. "He Jinyao and I are legally married, and we've received our marriage certificate. And now he's having sex with you. In other words, either that or he was guilty of bigamy. Either that or rape. Since it's a crime, I can only call the police." "You're crazy." He Xianyao didn't expect Su Qingsang to be so unpredictable. "He didn't rape me." "Not rape?" Su Qingsang's face was full of understanding. They cheated on each other during marriage. Having a relationship with another woman was considered immoral, right? Since that was the case, that would also require reporting to the police. At the very least, he should be locked up for 3 to 5 months as punishment. Don't you agree? Are you crazy? He is your husband. He Xianyao didn't know what to say. How could this woman be like this? Chapter 115. Su Qingsang laughed at He Xuanyao's strange way of thinking. "You know he's my husband? You know he's my husband and you want him to take responsibility for you? If he wants to take responsibility for you, then it can only be bigamy." He Xianyao had completely caught up with Su Qingsang's thoughts. "You can divorce him. If he takes responsibility for me after you divorce, then it won't be bigamy, right?" "I don't want to." Su Qingsang refused without thinking. "Why should I divorce him? Would it be easy for you two to get divorced? Don't even think about it. If you want him to take responsibility for you, I will never let him. Of course, if he wants to take responsibility for you too, then I can only sue him for bigamy. You are shameless." He Xianyao couldn't find the words to scold her. "Thank you. If defending my rights is shameless, I will take it as a compliment." "You." He Xianyao was flustered. "Why would Brother Jinyao like a woman like you? He must not know your true colors. You are such a vicious woman." She even wanted Brother Jinyao to go to jail. That was too much. "Yes. I am that vicious, but I can't help it. He Jinyao liked my viciousness, but he didn't like your kindness. Speaking of which, I'm also puzzled. Her helpless look made He Xianyao want to vomit blood. You, don't go too far. She was about to cry. She had never been so humiliated in her life. However, she couldn't find a way to fight back. She only felt that whatever she said would be wrong. What if I were you? I will pack my clothes now and leave. Of course, you can stay if you don't want to leave. When Hua Jinyao wakes up, he will tell you with facts whether he will choose me, a vicious woman, or you, a kind little white flower. Her sarcastic tone made He Xuanyao's heart hurt. She was angry and wronged. Unfortunately, she wasn't wearing any clothes. She was in this state again. She looked at Su Qingsang, who was standing by the bed with her arms crossed. She was ashamed, angry, hateful, and annoyed. In the end, he had to get out of bed and pick up his clothes. Su Qingsang watched as she hurriedly put on her clothes. Her eyes were red, but she didn't feel any sympathy for her. She glanced at Hua Jinyao, who had been sleeping without any reaction. She was angry. He's such a big man, but he doesn't look stupid normally, right? How could he be so easily schemed against? Or could it be that he was interested in this peacock-like woman who liked to show off? Otherwise, with that woman's frail body, how could she bring him upstairs? To put it bluntly, he had to be willing. The more she thought about it, the angrier she got. She even had the urge to fetch a basin of cold water to wake him up. However, she wasn't stupid. She knew that she had to wait until He Xianyao left. If she did it now, He Xianyao would laugh at her. He Xianyao put on her clothes as fast as she could. She stood there, ready to leave. However, she was unwilling to leave just like that. She turned to look at Su Qingsang. Her face was still angry, but there was a hint of reluctance on it. Don't be smug. A person like you isn't good enough for Big Brother Jinyao. I will definitely snatch him back. Just you wait. Sure. I'll wait. Su Qingsang spread her hands and looked indifferent. You can talk big after you really snatch him back. For now, I am still his wife, the legitimate Mrs. Hua. Su Qingsang's emphasis on the word Mrs. Hua made He Xianyao feel defeated again. She had been holding back her emotions, but now she couldn't control them anymore. You bad woman. Chapter 116. The sound of crying and the door slamming seemed to make Hua Jinyao, who was drunk, sober up. His body moved, and his hand subconsciously reached to the side. Su Qingsang's hand happened to be next to him. Hua Jinyao grabbed her hand, and she lost her balance and fell into his arms. Hua Jinyao. Su Qingsang thought that Hua Jinyao had woken up, so she tried to prop herself up and get even with him. Hua Jinyao opened his eyes in a daze, then closed them again to see who was in front of him. He kissed her on the face with his lips that reeked of alcohol. When Su Qingsang couldn't stand it anymore and wanted to hit him, he rubbed his head against her neck. Wife, that was what he had gotten used to these days. Su Qingsang's body slightly froze. She stopped moving and looked up at Hua Jinyao in front of her. He was not sober yet, and his body reeked of alcohol. She hated it when men were drunk. She also didn't like it when Hua Jinyao was brought to a hotel by a woman without any precaution. But the way he called her wife made her heart, which had softened a little, stop flinching. Hua Jinyao reached out and tightened his arms around Su Qingsang's waist. He rubbed his cheek against Su Qingsang's neck again. Wife. Su Qingsang finally stopped moving after murmuring the two words in a low voice. She sighed in her heart and spoke in a very low voice. Hua Jinyao, you really know how to cause trouble. Messing with a person like He Xianyao was really, she looked down and thought of some problems. She suddenly looked up at Hua Jinyao. He Xianyao and Qiu Zhenjiao were friends, which meant that her family was not bad. So why did she keep looking at Hua Jinyao? The strange feeling from before came again. Su Qingsang looked at Hua Jinyao carefully. A person like He Xianyao would not fall for an ordinary person. So who was Hu Jinyao? She remembered that although she couldn't tell the brand of his clothes, the quality and workmanship were excellent. And the expensive gifts he bought for Su Chenghui and Li Qianxua last time. And the diamond ring he bought for her, and the clothes he took her to buy. And all the signs added up, and the previous suspicion came back again. Su Qingsang suddenly felt a little unhappy. Without thinking, she pushed Hu Jinyao away. Drunk, he didn't have much strength and was successfully pushed away by her. As soon as Hu Jinyao's body left her, she got up. She wanted to leave, but after staring at Hu Jinyao's sleeping face for a while, she finally turned around and went to the bathroom. When Hu Jinyao woke up, he had a headache. He hadn't experienced this hangover in a long time. He raised his hand and rubbed his temples. A few thoughts flashed through his mind. The air conditioner was a little low, but that wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was that he didn't seem to be wearing any clothes. Not wearing any clothes? He suddenly opened his eyes and looked at his body, then at the environment in front of him. They were not at home, not in Su Qingsang's apartment. This is a hotel? He remembered that he had met Li Junxing yesterday. He had a good relationship with Li Junxing. The two of them met in another city, so they got a little drunk after a while. What happened next? His last impression was that He Xiankai and He Xianyao had gotten close to him. Hu Jinyao's face suddenly turned cold. It seemed that he had been too careless. He hadn't expected Li Junxing to be present, and the He sibling still dared to attack him. Chapter 117. He looked at the woman sleeping on the other side of the bed. She had her back to him, and her black hair covered her face. Her smooth shoulders were not covered by the quilt. There was no smell in the room except for the lingering smell of alcohol. That woman was still sleeping soundly at this moment. Hu Jinyao was not in the mood to guess what happened after he got drunk. He was not in the mood to think about how He Xianyao planned to take off his clothes. Hu Jinyao sneered and resisted the urge to strangle the woman. Good. Really good. He had really underestimated the courage of the siblings who had returned home. He got out of bed without thinking and found that his clothes were gone. The sneer on his face deepened. If he guessed correctly, He Xiankai would come with his men to kill him. It was going to be a good show. If he didn't cooperate, he wouldn't be able to face the He siblings' painstaking plan. He looked around but didn't see his cell phone. Hu Jinyao used the phone in the room to ask someone to bring him a set of clothes. He hung up the phone and found that He Xianyao, on the bed, seemed to have been woken up by him. He saw her body move. She woke up. Good. Very good. Hu Jinyao took 2 steps forward and put his hand around the damn woman's neck. He Xianyao, you, oh. The familiar voice made Hu Jinyao loosen his hand. Her black hair spread out, revealing the delicate white face below. Who else could it be but Su Qingsang? Wife? Su Qingsang was about to wake up when she was suddenly strangled. She coughed a few times before she woke up and opened her eyes to look at Hu Jinyao. What? Strangling me early in the morning? So you and that lady like to play this kind of thrill? Wife, why are you here? Hu Jinyao quickly checked her neck and was relieved to find that it was just a little red and not too serious. Wife, are you okay? I didn't mean to. You just what? Su Qingsang recovered and sat up. She glanced at Hu Jinyao, who was still naked. I didn't know you had this kind of hobby. Wife, I didn't. Hu Jinyao was shocked and quickly explained, Wife, listen to me. Listen to me, I thought you were He Xianyao. Hu Jinyao was anxious to explain. Su Qingsang sat up straight. She wasn't wearing any clothes, so she could only pull up the quilt to cover her body. Yes. I know. Do you think I am He Xianyao? Not only did you come to get a room last night, but you also held me the whole night and called He Xuanyao's name. Impossible. Hua Jinyao shook his head, his face full of shock. Su Qingsang sneered. Why not? Look at my hand. She raised her hand. There was a large bruise on her arm. Hua Jinyao didn't even have time to defend himself. He rushed forward to check her hand injury. What happened to your hand? How, you did it? Su Qingsang wasn't polite at all. Hua Jinyao looked a little embarrassed. Really? So you're saying that I deliberately hurt my hand to slander you? Su Qingsang's anger had not subsided yet. Yesterday, she had thought that this guy was really drunk to death. Who would have thought that this person still had a trick up his sleeve? After He Xianyao left, Hua Jinyao started in the middle of the night. Not only did he vomit all over himself, but he also vomited all over her. The disgusting smell was all over her. Chapter 118. Otherwise, why would she want to sleep naked like this? It was all because she had no clothes. She even tidied up the room. That was enough. Hua Jinyao blinked and didn't seem to believe it. Is it really me? Hua Jinyao. Su Qingsang sat up, and the anger on her face did not diminish. Don't you think you should explain to me why you were naked in the same bed with another woman? Hua Jinyao's eyes fell on Su Qingsang at that moment. He suddenly got on the bed with his hands on both sides of Su Qingsang. Honey, you're naked. Don't change the subject. Honey. I don't think we've done it in a hotel, have we? Explain it to me, you. He could explain later. Right now, he wanted to eat first. Hua Jinyao, let go of me. Finally having a chance to breathe, Su Qingsang pushed him away with her hands and feet. No. Hua Jinyao acted like a rascal. No matter what, it was good enough that the person who showed up this morning was not He Xianyao, that disgusting woman. He could take his time to deal with He Xianyao, but before that, he had more important things to do. It was sunny outside, but Su Qingsang couldn't say a word. When it was over, Su Qingsang didn't even have the strength to raise her hand. She looked at Hua Jinyao and was angry. She couldn't help but grab his hand and bite it hard. Hua Jinyao didn't look fat, but his body was very strong. His arms were very hard. Su Qingsang's cheeks hurt from biting him, but she didn't manage to injure him badly. She was so angry that she couldn't help but bite him harder. It hurts. Hua Jinyao looked at her with an exaggerated expression. Honey, it hurts. It hurts so much. How dare he say that? Su Qingsang was angry and bit harder. In the end, her teeth were numb, so she let go of him. Honey. Hua Jinyao looked at his arm, which had a circle of teeth marks. He was angry but didn't dare to say anything. Su Qingsang turned over and didn't want to talk to him. She had 2 operations yesterday and finally had a rest, but this guy did it again. She hadn't slept much at all, yet she had been woken up by this fellow early in the morning. Seeing that she was angry, Hua Jinyao stuck close to her again. Wife, don't call me. Honey, I was wrong. I said don't call me. Honey, I was wrong. Shut up. Don't talk. Wife, Hua Jinyao. Su Qingsang couldn't take it anymore. She turned around and sat up. She glared at Hua Jinyao and said, Are you done? Hua Jinyao's body shrank back and his voice was very soft. I really know that I was wrong. But I still have to explain. What happened yesterday was not what you think. Yes. What do I want? It was the first time Su Qingsang had spoken in such a sarcastic tone. This was also the first time she realized that she had such abilities. I have nothing to do with He Xianyao. Yesterday's incident was actually like this. He explained everything in the shortest possible terms. Su Qingsang listened to his explanation, then raised her eyebrows and looked at him. Are you saying that you're innocent? Of course. Chapter 119. didn't I tell you? I thought that if Junsheng was here, they wouldn't. Meeting Su Qingsang's mocking eyes, Hua Jinyao reached out and held her hand. Honey, I swear, I really didn't do anything wrong to you. I'm a victim too. You're a victim? Why do I see that you're enjoying it? If he were a victim, wouldn't he have to cooperate? She saw that he was very cooperative. Absolutely not. Hua Jinyao began to be playful again. He pulled her into his arms. You see, I was so brave just now. That's because it was you. If it were any other woman, I wouldn't have reacted at all, so you. Hua Jinyao. Su Qingsang couldn't listen anymore. What was he talking about? Shut up. Hua Jinyao made a zipping motion with his mouth, but he was unwilling to give up. He moved his face closer to hers and said, Honey, just believe me this time. Su Qingsang didn't speak. She turned her face away and ignored him. Hua Jinyao turned around and shook her arm like a child. All right. Honey, I promise, there won't be a next time. Do you want a next time? Of course not. Hua Jinyao quickly raised 3 fingers and looked determined. There won't be a next time. Su Qingsang looked at him and believed half of what he said. He was just trying to blackmail him. Hua Jinyao was so drunk. How could he say he Xuanyao's name? But she had to teach him a lesson. Otherwise, he wouldn't know what he did wrong. However, Su Qingsang's body suddenly stiffened. Hua Jinyao, who was glued to her, naturally felt it. Honey. Was he going to get even with her? Su Qingsang turned her face to look at him. Hua Jinyao was very handsome. She admitted that he was really handsome. But what about other aspects? That he's Xianyao from yesterday, right? She did tell me some things. What? Hua Jinyao looked like he was facing a formidable enemy. She said that you were just playing with me. She said that you wouldn't like someone like me. She also said, Honey, that's all nonsense. Nothing like that. But she told me that I didn't deserve you. And your family will never allow you to marry an illegitimate daughter like me. Honey. Hua Jinyao's expression changed. Su Qingsang said word by word, Hua Jinyao, I'm quite curious. What's your family like? Who are you? The air in the room suddenly became silent. Hua Jinyao looked into Su Qingsang's eyes, which were calm and wise. Su Qingsang had always been a very smart person. He knew that. It was just that her personality was not one to argue with others. He was not stupid. Hua Jinyao seemed to be thinking about what to say. Honey, I can explain. Tell me. In other words, you're really hiding something from me, right? No. Hua Jinyao quickly waved his hand. The doorbell rang. Hua Jinyao jumped out of bed as if he had been granted amnesty. He casually put on a bathrobe and went to open the door. Of course, Su Qingsang couldn't let anyone see her like this. She shrunk her body into the quilt. It was someone who was delivering clothes to Hua Jinyao. Not only did they deliver clothes, but they also delivered Su Qingsang's clothes. After the clothes were delivered, Hua Jinyao returned to the room. Su Qingsang sat up again, still waiting for him to explain. Honey. Please don't be angry when I tell you. Chapter 120. Hua Jinyao looked at Su Qingsang's face and cleared his throat. Actually, my family is quite well off. How well off is that? I have a little money. And? It couldn't be as simple as a little money, could it? I had a conflict with my family before. I came out, and then I met you. Afraid that Su Qingsang wouldn't believe him, Hua Jinyao took her hand again. I have nothing to do with my family now. That's it? That's it? That's it. Hua Jinyao nodded heavily, afraid that she wouldn't believe him. Did you have a serious conflict with your family? Yes. Hua Jinyao nodded hurriedly. It was very serious. Now I've left my family and started all over again. That's why I didn't tell you. Su Qingsang didn't speak. He couldn't tell if she was angry or something else. Hua Jinyao looked at her carefully. Honey, you're not angry, are you? In other words, you've left your family and are living here alone? Yes. Hua Jinyao nodded. So you see, I'm really pitiful. Pitiful? How was he pitiful? Su Qingsang almost laughed out of anger. With his personality, how could he allow himself to be pitiful? You're not an only child, are you? If he was, it would be bad for his family if he came here alone. I'm not. Hua Jinyao's voice was very soft. If Su Qingsang looked carefully, she would find that Hua Jinyao's eyes were a little strange. You're not lying to me about anything else, are you? Su Qingsang looked at him suspiciously. Why did she still feel that something was wrong? No, I promise not. Hua Jinyao raised 3 fingers. In a place where Su Qingsang couldn't see, he secretly put his other hand behind his back and made a cross. Su Qingsang wanted to ask more questions, but her phone rang. She picked it up and found that there was an emergency at the hospital. I have to go back to work. She was supposed to work the night shift today. Su Qingsang quickly got out of bed, but fell forward because of her weak legs. Hua Jinyao quickly caught her. If you're tired, don't go to work. Haha. Su Qingsang sneered. Who made me tired? Me. Hua Jinyao's momentum weakened again. It's good that you know. Thinking of that, Su Qingsang added, next time, don't drink. Yes. Hua Jinyao raised his hand and saluted. I promise I won't drink anymore. I'll listen to my wife. His playful look gave Su Qingsang a headache. If she were his parents, she would probably want to kick him out of the house too, wouldn't she? Hua Jinyao's car stopped at the entrance of the hospital. Su Qingsang hurriedly got out of the car. Wifey. Hua Jinyao looked at her, and there was a flash of hesitation in his eyes. What? Su Qingsang was in a hurry to get into the hospital, so she ignored the hesitant look on Hua Jinyao's face. Nothing, you haven't given me a good bye kiss. Hua Jinyao smiled again, and his playful face returned. This person really made people speechless. Su Qingsang rolled her eyes, ignored him, and went straight into the hospital. Looking at her back, Hua Jinyao didn't hurry to start the car. Instead, he took out his phone. He pressed a few numbers and coldly instructed the person on the other end of the line, it's me. The cooperation with the He family is now completely stopped. Chapter 121. Su Qingsang rushed to the hospital and brought in a woman who was 7 months pregnant. She was said to be 7 months pregnant, but in fact, she was not even 7 months pregnant. She accidentally tripped when she got off the bus. Zhang Qiubai and the other 2 doctors all had surgeries. Su Qingsang followed Deputy Director Chen into the operating room. Su Qingsang and Deputy Director Chen put in a lot of effort and finally stabilized the situation. However, this pregnant woman would probably have to stay in bed for the next 3 months. Before Su Qingsang could change out of her surgical gown, the pregnant woman's family came. The pregnant woman's husband scolded the woman who had just woken up. You're already an adult, don't you know how to ride a car? How did he fall from the car? What if you hurt my son? That's right. The pregnant woman's mother-in-law also scolded, what kind of woman are you? Let's see what you'll do if you drop my grandson. What a useless woman. The mother and son scolded each other fiercely. The pregnant woman's face was pale. She shrank back and did not make a sound. Seeing that, Su Qingsang frowned. She couldn't help but say, this is a ward. Please be quiet. Although the pregnant woman's family stopped making a fuss, their faces were still full of anger. Especially after hearing about the fees in the future. The pregnant woman's mother-in-law's face darkened. Seeing that, Su Qingsang asked the nurse to come in and asked the family members to leave. Before she could recover from the shock, Su Yusen came again. Since Bai Jihan's operation last time, she didn't know why the bleeding had not stopped. She was shy and too embarrassed to go outside to check, so Su Yusen had to come to Su Qingsang again. Su Qingsang re-examined Bai Jihan and told her some precautions. Only then did Su Yusen send Bai Jihan back. President's Office of Li Corporation. Li Qianxue listened to her subordinate's report, and her expression was very ugly. Su Yusen actually went to see Su Qingsang again? She couldn't believe it when Su Peijian told her about it. After all these years, Su Qingsang had always behaved herself. She was not one to vent her anger on others. She had no intention of inflicting on Su Qingsang the pain that the appearance of that woman had brought her. However, her sore spot was Su Peijian and Su Yusen. She would never allow Su Qingsang to hurt Su Yusen, even if it was just a possibility. I've heard about it. You can leave first. Tell the secretary to leave. Li Qianxue looked at the computer screen in front of her. Perhaps she should teach Su Qingsang a small lesson. At the very least, he wanted her to recognize her identity. When Hu Jinyao came to pick Su Qingsang up, he found that she didn't seem to be in a good mood. What's wrong? What happened? Su Qingsang shook her head. After she left the hospital, she didn't want to talk about the hospital anymore. Hu Jinyao carefully observed her expression. Honey, I'm fine. My boss gave me the commission. Are you free tomorrow? How about accompanying me to look at the car? Whatever. If you drive it yourself. I'm glad you like it. Of course not. Hu Jinyao shook his head. Give me your car. I want to buy you a new one. What kind of car do you like? I'm fine. In her eyes, there was no difference between 100,000 and a few 100,000 or even 1,000,000 for a transportation tool. Honey, don't be like this. Then tell me, what do you like? He took her to buy clothes, but she didn't like them. He gave her jewelry, but she said she couldn't wear it. Now, he bought her a car, but she said it was whatever. Chapter 122. I really don't have any special preferences. As an illegitimate daughter, Su Qingsang didn't think she had the right to develop her own hobbies. Besides, she wasn't in the mood today. Honey, are you okay? Su Qingsang shook her head. She was just thinking about Zhang Mei, the pregnant woman who was admitted today. Zhang Mei accidentally fell on the bus. Her husband and mother-in-law knew about it, but none of them cared about her physical condition. Instead, they kept blaming her. She had been in the hospital for a long time, and it wasn't the first time she had seen something like this. But she still felt very uncomfortable. Was the purpose of a woman's existence just to have children? Honey? Hu Jinyao asked again when he didn't get a response from her. Su Qingsang turned to look at him and suddenly thought of the contraceptive pills in her bag. Hu Jinyao, what do you think if I don't want to have children? She was inexplicably nervous. Children? Hu Jinyao hadn't thought about this before. Nothing. If you don't want to have children, then don't. Really? Of course. Hu Jinyao reached out and rubbed her head. Isn't there a saying that goes, I'm a girl, and I can have children if I want to? Pfft, Su Qingsang almost choked on her own saliva. Where did you hear that? It's a slogan some female colleagues in my company shouted on March 8 this year. They feel pressured and don't want to have a second child. Su Qingsang nodded. She understood it very well. Although they could have 2 children now, many people actually didn't want to have one. Why do you still pay attention to your female colleagues? Many of them are beautiful, right? Su Qingsang joked. Hu Jinyao hurriedly raised 3 fingers. Really? None of those women are prettier than my wife. Keep bragging. Su Qingsang was aware of her own appearance. She was only slightly above average. It's true. You'll know when you see that I'm not working in that company anymore. Su Qingsang made a long, oh, sound. So you're saying that there are too few beautiful women in your previous company, so you quit? There are a lot of beautiful women in that company now? Hua Jinyao didn't know what to say. Looking at Su Qingsang's smiling face, he suddenly leaned over. Honey, are you jealous? Who's jealous? She didn't want to get jealous. Honey, don't be jealous. I've said it before, in my heart, my wife is the most beautiful. Other women can't even compare to a finger of yours. Glib tongue. That was enough. Honey, I'm really not a glib talker. Look at my mouth, it's not greasy at all. As for whether it was slippery or not. Do you want to give it a try? As he spoke, he deliberately moved closer to her, looking as if he wanted Su Qingsang to appraise him. Su Qingsang couldn't bear it anymore. Why are you still driving? Do you want us to get home at midnight? Hua Jinyao quickly started the car. Before he stepped on the accelerator, he leaned over and kissed Su Qingsang hard on the cheek. Don't worry, wife. You're the prettiest. Su Qingsang couldn't stand it anymore and turned to look at the street outside. However, the curl of her lips revealed her joyful mood. She didn't expect that a few words from Hua Jinyao would be able to calm her down so quickly. Chapter 123. What Su Qingsang didn't expect was that when she arrived at the hospital the next day, the pregnant woman named Zhang Mei was not well again. She had fallen in the ward and was bleeding profusely. She and Zhang Qiubai tried their best but failed to save Zhang Mei's baby. It was a baby girl, a fully formed baby girl. No matter how much Su Qingsang saw it, she couldn't help feeling sad. What surprised her was that Zhang Mei's family didn't scold her today, even though they had made a big fuss yesterday. Zhang Mei had been quiet since the baby was gone. She had been lying there without saying a word or moving. Su Qingsang was only an obstetrician. She comforted them and told them some things to take note of before turning around and leaving. Zhua Hongchen had gone to a hospital in another city for an academic exchange last week and had just returned today. He came to see Su Qingsang as soon as he came back. The two of them agreed to eat together. The hospital's cafeteria was on the first floor behind the inpatient department. It was also convenient for family members to buy food for the patients. Su Qingsang and Zhua Hongchen were halfway through their meal when they heard screams and noises outside. She and Zhua Hongchen looked at each other for a few seconds, then got up at the same time and rushed outside. The bloody scene in front of her made Su Qingsang, who was used to seeing life and death, feel nauseous. Zhang Mei, who she and Zhang Qiubai had just saved in the morning, was lying on the ground with a pool of blood beside her. Zhua Hongchen was stunned for a moment and quickly rushed over. Quick, call a cart. Su Qingsang reacted quickly and followed him. Before the cart arrived, she looked at Zhua Hongchen and shook her head. She's not breathing. Su Qingsang's eyes were red after she said those words. Zhang Mei's eyes were wide open, as if she was still looking at the blue sky above her head. Su Qingsang reached out with trembling hands to close her eyelids. Qingsang? Zhua Hongchen noticed that she was not in a good mood. Su Qingsang covered her mouth and stood there, her heart throbbing uncomfortably. She's not breathing, Su Qingsang said again. The scene was chaotic. Some people were screaming, some were taking pictures, and some were rushing over. Zhua Hongchen helped Su Qingsang up. Qingsang, are you okay? She's my patient. Su Qingsang watched as someone covered Zhang Mei's body with a white cloth. Tears welled up in her eyes. She was fine this morning. It's none of your business. Zhua Hongchen glanced upstairs. She probably jumped down on her own. Su Qingsang remained silent. She gently pulled Zhua Hongchen's hand away. The police came, and so did the people from the hospital administration. It was noisy and the hospital was in a mess. Su Qingsang stayed in her office, waiting for the results. Soon, the results were out. Zhang Mei committed suicide. The police were still investigating the natural causes. As Zhang Mei's doctor, Su Qingsang, who had been involved in Zhang Mei's surgeries for 2 consecutive days, was also called in for questioning. This matter lasted until the evening, when the police finally finished questioning everyone. When Su Qingsang walked out of the hospital, the cordon had been removed, and the police had left. Hua Jinyao was leaning against the side of the car, waiting for her. When he saw her coming out, he quickly walked over and said, "Honey, are you off work? I have an appointment with someone to see the car today. Shall we go now?" Su Qingsang walked past him and headed outside without stopping. Chapter 124. I want to go home. Su Qingsang's voice was very soft and sounded very tired. She really wasn't in the mood to look at cars today. All right. Let's go home. Hua Jinyao looked at her pale face and took her to the car without asking what had happened. From beginning to end, Su Qingsang didn't say a word. She just stared blankly out of the car window. Hua Jinyao turned to look at her from time to time. He couldn't hide the worry on his face. Wife? Su Qingsang closed her eyes and didn't want to talk. Hua Jinyao stopped talking and sped up. Sister Lu had already prepared dinner. When she saw them coming in, she greeted them. Sister Lu, you go back first. We'll clean up the rest tomorrow. Seeing Su Qingsang's expression, Sister Lu knew that something was up. She nodded and turned to leave. Honey, let's eat first. Hua Jinyao helped Su Qingsang sit down at the dining table. Seeing that she didn't move, he got up and served her a bowl of soup. Sister Lu must have made this soup early in the morning. Drink it while it's hot. Su Qingsang held the bowl of soup. The temperature of the soup made her feel a little better. She picked it up and took a sip, then put it down. What's wrong? Is it very hot? Hua Jinyao kept looking at her. Let it go for a while. Do you want to eat first? I'll go get you some rice. No need. Su Qingsang stood up. I'm not eating anymore. She turned to leave, but Hua Jinyao wouldn't let her. He quickly pulled her hand and made her sit down again. What happened to you? Even if he had no appetite, he still had to eat, right? What if I'm hungry? I'm not hungry. Even if you're not hungry, you still have to eat. Hua Jinyao was very insistent. He pressed her shoulders and didn't let her get up. Just eat whatever you like. I said I don't want to eat it. After saying that, Su Qingsang saw Hua Jinyao's frightened face. She withdrew her hand and looked a little disappointed. Sorry. I didn't mean to yell at you. I know. Hua Jinyao nodded and looked at her. He reached out and pulled her body over, letting her sit on his lap. Su Qingsang struggled, but she was no match for his strength. Hua Jinyao, what happened? Nothing. Su Qingsang didn't want to talk. This was the first time. This was the first time a pregnant woman she had taken care of had committed suicide in front of her. Honey. Hua Jinyao reached out and held her face in his hands. His dark eyes looked straight into her face. His expression was as deep as the sea. You are my wife. I'm your husband. Is there anything you can't tell me? His palm was firm and warm. His expression was focused and sincere. The emotions that Su Qingsang had been suppressing for the whole afternoon suddenly seemed to be unable to be suppressed at this moment. Zhang Mei is dead. Who was Zhang Mei? She is pregnant. Su Qingsang briefly explained what had happened that day. I don't know why she wanted to commit suicide. She was still young enough to have more children. Hua Jinyao hugged her tightly in his arms and gently patted her back. It's none of your business. Honey, listen, this has nothing to do with you. Su Qingsang lowered her eyes and said nothing. How could it not be related? If she had paid more attention to the pregnant woman's emotions at that time, if she had asked the nurse to keep an eye on her, she wouldn't, honey. Hua Jinyao let go of her and turned to hold her shoulders. He stared at her and said, "Look at me and listen. It has nothing to do with you. Don't think about it." Chapter 125. She was the first pregnant woman to commit suicide in my hands. You're wrong. Her suicide wasn't because of you. It was because of her family. Hua Jinyao's voice was very soft. Where were her family when she committed suicide? I don't know. Su Qingsang really didn't know. She seemed to have seen the pregnant woman's family when people came and went in the hospital today, but she really wasn't sure if they were there at the time. So you see, she just lost her child, and her family wasn't with her. What does this have to do with you? Su Qingsang didn't say anything. Even if it had nothing to do with her, she was still very sad. Okay, honey. Hua Jinyao patted her on the shoulder. Don't think about it. You eat first. If there's anything, wait for the results of the police first. Now, you eat first. Hua Jinyao. Even if you don't eat or drink now, that pregnant woman's life won't come back. What's more, you don't want to see something like this happen. So don't blame yourself anymore, okay? His voice was as gentle as a hot spring, slowly flowing into her heart. His hand on her back had been gently patting her back in a soothing manner, and her emotions slowly relaxed. Su Qingsang pursed her lips into a straight line. She looked up at Hua Jinyao. He had a serious expression on his face as he comforted her. It was completely different from his usual carefree and cheeky appearance. Hua Jinyao seemed to be more handsome and charming like this. How is it? Did you suddenly find your husband very handsome? Hua Jinyao touched his chin and looked distressed. Actually, sometimes I'm also very troubled. Being so handsome is simply infuriating. Su Qingsang couldn't listen to it anymore. This person couldn't be serious for more than 3 minutes. But his words also successfully diverted her attention. She sat back in her seat, closed the bowl of soup, and took a sip. Yes, the temperature of the soup was just right. She tried to be more open-minded. There were some things that she really couldn't control. Hua Jinyao finally picked up the bowl and began to eat. Su Qingsang glanced at him. She didn't want to admit it, but she had to. After such a thing happened, if she came back alone in this cold home, she would definitely feel worse than now. It seemed that with the addition of Hua Jinyao, some things had begun to change. Su Qingsang didn't think it was a bad thing to have such a change happen again. Su Qingsang calmed down, but when she went to the hospital the next day, she found that the lobby of the hospital was packed with people. The man was Zhang Mei's husband. It had only been a day, but he was now followed by a large group of people. Zhang Mei's husband noticed her when she walked in. He raised his hand and pointed at Su Qingsang. It's her, it's this doctor. She killed Mei. Su Qingsang was stunned. Before she could react, her body had already been dragged over by one of the men standing beside Zhang Mei's husband. What are you doing? Su Qingsang struggled to get rid of the man's hand and took a big step back. He straightened his clothes and looked at the large group of people in front of him. This is a hospital. What do you think this is for? Chapter 126. Quacks hurt people. Punish quacks severely. The group of people behind Zhang Mei's husband shouted together. Calm down. Su Qingsang had finally calmed down from yesterday's depression, but she didn't expect to encounter such a thing when she came here early in the morning. The police have come to investigate Zhang Mei's death. It was a suicide. I don't understand why you're doing this. You forced her to commit suicide. Zhang Mei's husband didn't give in. If you didn't kill my child, why would my wife commit suicide? It was the first time that Su Qingsang had met such an unreasonable person. Your wife fell. It was difficult to save the child. Your wife fell, and it's going to be hard to save the child. Moreover, she had fallen down in the ward. Your wife's death was an accident. We didn't want it to happen. No matter what, Su Qingsang couldn't let the hospital take the blame. No matter what, Su Qingsang couldn't let the hospital take the blame. She couldn't let herself take the blame. Why couldn't my child be saved if you didn't want it to happen? Aren't you a Class 3 grade A hospital? Didn't you say that you have the best obstetrics and gynecology department in Lin City? Why couldn't my wife's child be saved? I don't care. My wife died because of you. You forced her to commit suicide. All the treatment procedures and rescue procedures in our hospital are reasonable and compliant. All the consultations and surgeries are carried out with the consent and signature of your family members. We don't understand. I signed because you tricked me. Zhang Mei's husband took a step forward and said in a louder voice, My wife died because of you. Sir, please be reasonable. Your wife's death was an accident. I'll say it again. Our hospital and our doctors didn't want this to happen. You didn't want this to happen, but it did. My wife is dead. Do you want to let it go like this? Behind them, there were doctors who had heard the news. Not only Zhang Qiubai, but Zhuo Hongchen also came. The other two doctors in the department and the deputy director, Chen Xiaoyu, were all here. However, Zhang Mei's husband didn't seem to see those doctors. He only stared at Su Qingsang. Quacks hurt people. We are going to punish the murderer severely today. It wasn't that Su Qingsang didn't know that there was a profession called medical troublemaker in this world, but she never thought that one day she would encounter it herself. You guys calm down. Su Qingsang looked at Zhang Qiubai and the others who were rushing over and felt more confident. The police have already come to a conclusion on this matter. There won't be any results if you keep making a ruckus like this. You all heard it? You all heard it. The hospital was irresponsible. Killing someone and not taking responsibility? How can we just let it go like this? Zhang Mei's husband shouted, and the people he brought started to fight. Do it. Smash it. Do it. Smash. Su Qingsang didn't even have time to dodge and was pushed by the leader of the group. Zhuo Hongchen, who was behind her, quickly supported her and led her backward. But there were many people in front. It was too late for the security guards to stop them. What happened next was like a farce. Zhang Mei's family members were agitated. One by one, they stepped forward. Su Qingsang wanted them to stop. Chapter 127. Behind her was the reception desk. Su Qingsang was about to fall and hit the desk. Qingsang, be careful. Zhuo Hongchen quickly reached out his hand and pulled Su Qingsang out. He saved Su Qingsang but fell to the ground. His back hit the desk and he groaned in pain. Are you okay? Su Qingsang was anxious. What was going on? She helped Zhuo Hongchen up. Zhuo Hongchen was hit in the back but he was worried that Su Qingsang would be hurt, so he helped her to the side. Zhang Mei's husband didn't give up and wanted to attack the doctor. Fortunately, the security guards finally showed their strength at this time, blocking together to prevent a bigger conflict. It was still a mess. With the intervention of the police, the chaos finally calmed down. Apart from Zhuo Hongchen, 2 other doctors and 3 nurses were injured. The reception desk was smashed and some equipment in the lobby was also damaged. Zhang Mei's family was taken away by the police. It was the same for the leaders of the group. It was a mess. Su Qingsang had nothing to do, so she helped the hospital staff clean up the reception desk. According to preliminary estimates, the total damage to the facilities was more than 200,000 yuan. Su Qingsang's first hospital was a famous Class 3 Grade A hospital in Lin City. Once the news came out, it went viral on Weibo. Netizens who didn't know what happened scolded the hospital, saying that it was the irresponsible doctors who did it. Zhang Mei's death changed from a simple case of a pregnant woman's suicide to a hot topic. Su Qingsang also became a key figure in this incident. It had nothing to do with her. She was just a patient. She was one of the doctors who rescued Zhang Mei the day before. Yesterday, she was also one of the doctors who rescued Zhang Mei when she lost her baby. As a result, Su Qingsang was in the eye of the storm. The public opinion was one-sided. They were all scolding the doctors and the hospital. The family members outside didn't dare to make trouble anymore, but they didn't leave either. They put up a white banner saying, "Quack doctors hurt people. A life for a life." That was bullsh*. Zhang Mei fell down on her own and accidentally miscarried her child. Why did it sound like the hospital had to pay the price from these people's mouths? Before Su Qingsang could think of a way to reason with the family members, she was informed by the hospital office that she was suspended. What? Su Qingsang widened her eyes and looked at Deputy Director Yang. This doesn't make sense, does it? She hadn't done anything wrong. Why was she suspended? Dr. Su, we didn't want to do this either. But this matter has become so big that we have no other choice. Even if there's no other way, it can't be handled like this, right? Su Qingsang tried to calm herself down. The more it was like this, the calmer she had to be. All the procedures are complete. There was nothing wrong with the rescue process. Whether the pregnant woman was forced to terminate her pregnancy or jump off a building, it has nothing to do with our hospital. It was true that she blamed herself for the accidental death of the pregnant woman, but there was no reason for her to put all the blame on herself. I know, we all know. Deputy Director Yang looked helpless. But so what if we know? The patient's family doesn't know, the netizens don't know, and the public doesn't know. Chapter 128. Not really. Deputy Director Yang looked like he was having a headache. This time, not only you, but also Deputy Director Chen is also suspended. You go home first and wait for the results of the investigation before deciding what to do next. Su Qingsang's lips were pressed into a straight line, and a hint of depression flashed across her beautiful face. Since things had come to this, she could only accept the result calmly. Okay. I got it. I hope the hospital can take into account the actual situation and prove our doctor's innocence. Dr. Su, Deputy Director Yang. I'm not the only one who's worried about this. It's about all doctors. If it's our responsibility, we have to bear it. If it's not our responsibility, we won't bear the injustice. Seeing Deputy Director Yang's serious face, Su Qingsang's attitude was unprecedentedly firm. If this matter can't prove our innocence and get the right treatment, who would dare to look for a doctor in the future? Who would dare to trust a doctor? Who would dare to be a doctor? I got it. Deputy Director Yang nodded. Dr. Su, you can go back first. I see. Deputy Chief Yang nodded. Dr. Su, you can go back first. Su Qingsang saw Hua Jinyao rushing over when she came out of the hospital office. She didn't expect him to appear at this hour. Su Qingsang was stunned and looked at him blankly. For a moment, she didn't know how to react. She didn't expect him to show up at this hour. Su Qingsang was stunned and looked at him blankly. For a moment, she didn't know how to react. Hua Jinyao took a few steps forward and stood in front of her. He held her shoulders and looked at her from head to toe. Are you hurt? Are you hurt? I'm fine. Su Qingsang shook her head. Why are you here? I'm fine. Su Qingsang shook her head. Why are you here? As soon as the family members came to make a scene, there was news on Weibo. He was still in a meeting at that time. When he finished the meeting, the matter had become big and the police were involved. He saw Su Qingsang's photo on Weibo and was afraid that she would be hurt, so he rushed over so quickly. Something happened. Su Qingsang looked around and didn't want to tell him here. But it's fine now. You're really not hurt? No. Su Qingsang thought of Zhuahongchen. Senior was there and he blocked it for me. Speaking of this, Su Qingsang still felt very guilty. Senior seemed to be hurt a little badly. I was going to see him now. Hearing Su Qingsang mention Zhuahongchen, Hua Jinyao's mouth twitched. Sure. I'll go with you. I have to thank him for saving you. Zhuahongchen's injury was a bruise. He was also a doctor, so he found some ointment and applied it before returning to his office. When Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao arrived, he had just sent one of his patients out. Qingsang, you're here? Zhuahongchen acted as if he didn't see Hua Jinyao beside him. I heard that someone from the hospital administration is looking for you. Are you all right? No. Su Qingsang shook her head. They just want me to rest at home for a few days. I'm fine. Why? Zhuahongchen frowned. I'm going to talk to my father now. Senior brother. Su Qingsang stopped him and said, it's normal for the hospital administration to deal with the situation like this. Speaking of which, I'll just take it as a break. But, senior marshal brother, thank you for saving me just now. But let's leave it at that. The family members were so emotional. As the hospital, they had to give the family members and the public an explanation. But Chapter 129. I'm fine. Zhuahongchen's lower back was actually still aching, but he didn't want Su Qingsang to worry. It's just a small injury. Don't worry too much. That's good. Hua Jinyao stood at the back and watched the two of them express their concern for each other by saying that they were fine. He felt like his teeth were about to fall off. Sour, so sour. He stretched out his long arms and pulled Su Qingsang into his arms. He took a small step forward, blocking most of Su Qingsang's body, and looked at Zhuahongchen. I heard that you saved Qingsang. Thank you so much. How about this? It's almost lunchtime. Why don't I be the host and invite senior brother to join us for a meal? Su Qingsang also looked at Zhuahongchen. He had helped her, so she should treat him to a meal. Zhuahongchen looked at Hua Jinyao's hand on Su Qingsang's shoulder and felt that it was very painful. If he ate with them again, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to eat. It's okay. I have a surgery in the afternoon. That's a pity. Hua Jinyao glanced at Su Qingsang as he spoke. Since you're not free, let's do it another day. Qingsang is also tired today. Why don't we go home and rest first? Okay. Su Qingsang nodded. I still have to go to the department to hand over my work. I'll go with you. Hua Jinyao put his arm around her waist. Let's go. We'll go now. Then, we'll go first. Okay, goodbye. Goodbye. Senior. It was Hua Jinyao who spoke. Before Su Qingsang could raise her hand to wave, he had already turned around and led her to the direction of the elevator. Zhuahongchen looked at their backs with an obvious disappointment in his eyes. Why are you walking so fast? Su Qingsang's demeanor was only maintained until they entered the elevator. I haven't finished talking to Senior. Hua Jinyao turned to look at her. Why do you have so much to say? You guys stay in the same hospital every day. Do you think you don't have enough time to talk? What are you talking about? Su Qingsang felt defeated. Senior's surgery is on the 7th floor. Our obstetrics department is on the 4th floor. How can we talk every day? If he got busy, it would be hard to even see him, okay? Are you regretting it? Hua Jinyao moved closer to her, his face almost touching hers. Su Qingsang took a step back. Hua Jinyao. Honey. Hua Jinyao put his arm around her waist. The person I want to talk to is me. I'm your husband. That's enough. Su Qingsang grabbed his hand. There are surveillance cameras here. So what? Hua Jinyao didn't care at all. It just so happens that the whole hospital knows that you have a husband. It'll also make those male doctors stay away from you. When he spoke, he especially emphasized the word male doctor, which made Su Qingsang want to laugh. Fortunately, the obstetrics and gynecology department in the hospital were all female doctors. If she were in another department, wouldn't Hua Jinyao ask her to quit working? She didn't want to talk to this guy anymore. She went back to her own department, gave some instructions, and then left. She followed Hua Jinyao downstairs. Other than Zhang Mei's husband, who had been taken away, there were other people outside. Those people were all watching, and the banner was still there. Su Qingsang saw it, and her mood became gloomy again. Hua Jinyao clearly felt the change in her mood. He reached out and held her hand tightly. Chapter 130. Su Qingsang shook her head. The guilt and self-blame she felt yesterday had almost dissipated after Zhang Mei's family made such a scene. However, she still felt bad. She felt bad for Zhang Mei and for the baby girl who didn't have time to see the world. The bodies of the poor mother and daughter were still in the morgue. But her husband and her family didn't feel sad at all. Instead, they came here to make a scene. Honey. Hua Jinyao noticed that some of those people were looking at Su Qingsang. He stretched out his hand and pulled her into his embrace. Su Qingsang turned to look at him. The autumn sun was hot. His arms were strong and warm. He held her tightly in his arms, giving her a great sense of security. She felt safe until she got into the car. Honey, don't worry. It'll be fine. Hua Jinyao held Su Qingsang's hand tightly with his free hand, silently supporting her. Su Qingsang looked at him and nodded. Okay. Su Qingsang was still in a bad mood when she got home. Hua Jinyao accompanied her into the room. Su Qingsang sat in the rocking chair and looked out of the window. Seeing her like this, Hua Jinyao left the room. He went to get a glass of water and came back in. Then he sat down beside her. The rocking chair was big, but it was a little crowded for two people. Su Qingsang didn't care about it. She took the glass from Hua Jinyao's hand and took a sip. I'm actually very sad. I didn't expect something like this to happen in the hospital today. What on earth happened? There was a lot of news on the internet. Hua Jinyao didn't believe it. He wanted to hear it from Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang told him what had happened. She started from the beginning, including how Zhang Mei fell, how she was sent to the hospital, and who she was with for the first time and the second time. After she finished, she sighed. I didn't expect that her family would come today after she jumped off the building yesterday. Hua Jinyao's face was serious. He pressed his lips into a straight line and looked at Su Qingsang's side profile. Did you complete all the paperwork? Of course. Everything was signed. What was the reaction of Zhang Mei's family when she jumped off the building yesterday? I don't know. Su Qingsang was so shocked by the sudden news that she didn't have time to pay attention to the family's reaction. The hospital only said to suspend you? It's a temporary suspension. We'll have to wait for the results. What's the worst that could happen? What could it be? It wasn't Hua Jinyao's conspiracy theory. He had a feeling that this matter wasn't as simple as it seemed. The worst result? Su Qingsang thought for a moment and said, it's not to the extent of revoking my medical license. After all, we were not obviously at fault. But if the hospital is determined to sacrifice us to give the public an explanation, then they can only fire me. This was the worst possible outcome. Hua Jinyao nodded and said, it's not a big deal. As long as you have a medical license, it doesn't matter where you become a doctor. How can this be the same? Su Qingsang glanced at him. She really didn't want to explain the difference. This was the first hospital she had interned in and the first hospital that had signed an employment contract with her. Her mentor was also here. She really didn't want to leave the first hospital. All right. It's different. Hua Jinyao took the cup from her hand and drank the rest of the water. You rest for a while. I'll order takeout. Okay. Sister Lu only came to cook at night. She didn't come in the morning or at noon. Hua Jinyao left the room and took the cup to the kitchen. He took out his phone and pressed a few numbers. Chapter 131. He didn't think it was that simple. Not to mention anything else, Su Qingsang had performed 2 surgeries with other people. Why was it that when the medical troublemakers came to make trouble, they decided that it was Su Qingsang? If there was no conspiracy, it would be fine. But if there was, Hua Jinyao's eyes were gloomy. Su Qingsang was easy to talk to, but he wasn't. He wouldn't accept the suspension for no reason. Those who dared to mess with him had to pay the price. He would never let these people bully Su Qingsang for no reason. As soon as he put down his phone, Su Qingsang came out. She had changed her clothes and seemed to have washed her face. The hair on her forehead was still a little wet. Every time she washed her face, her eyes would be covered with a layer of mist. She looked very charming. Hua Jinyao couldn't help but feel a little thirsty, but he knew it wasn't the right time. Why are you out? Did you order takeout? Not yet. The line is busy. Then let's go out to eat. Su Qingsang was still in a bad mood, but she wanted to go out for a walk. But, don't you need to go to work? Will it delay your work if you come back like this? No. Hua Jinyao shook his head and said matter-of-factly, I just got a big order from my company, so the boss doesn't dare to make things difficult for me. I have a lot of free time now. If Hua Jinyao's assistant, Yang Wenchang, and his secretary, Zhang Yang, heard what Hua Jinyao said, they would probably vomit blood. Honey, it's good that you don't need to go to work. I happen to be free in the afternoon. I can accompany you. Su Qingsang looked at him. It would be a lie to say that she wasn't touched. She had always been alone. Even if she had a good friend like Shi Mengwan. But Shi Mengwan always had her own things and her own family. When she was with Wei Lenin, they could barely be considered together. Her relationship with Wei Lenin was average. They would only meet occasionally and eat out together. Since she got together with Hua Jinyao, she realized that when she had something on her mind, it felt much better to have someone to accompany her than to be alone. Especially when this man was on her side almost unconditionally. Honey. Hua Jinyao's face suddenly enlarged in front of her. Su Qingsang was startled and instinctively wanted to step back. Hua Jinyao reached out and wrapped his arms around her waist. He moved his face closer to hers. Staring at me like that, did you realize that your husband is the most handsome man in the universe? The little bit of emotion in Su Qingsang's heart disappeared without a trace because of his words. Raising her hand to push against his chest, she tried to put some distance between the two of them. I realize that you are invincible and thick-skinned in the universe. Hua Jinyao wasn't angry at all. Instead, he smiled and pulled her body closer to his. Honey, you finally admit that I'm the best in the world? Admit it. I admit that you are the most thick-skinned person in the world. Hua Jinyao kissed Su Qingsang's cheek. Honey, thank you for the compliment. Su Qingsang had lost her temper. She found that if she stayed with Hua Jinyao for a long time, her temper might become better and better. How could this person always be so frivolous? Li Qianxue signed a document and looked at the person in front of her. Her voice was very calm. How's it going? Everything has been done according to your instructions. The assistant in front of him stood there, not even daring to breathe loudly. Chapter 132. Li Qianxue really disliked Su Qingsang's existence, but as long as she didn't provoke her, she didn't mind living peacefully with him. If Su Qingsang couldn't see things clearly and kept thinking about things that didn't belong to her, then she could only ask Su Qingsang to stay away from the Su family. Otherwise, he would appear in front of her from time to time and cause her annoyance. Yes. The assistant nodded and quickly retreated. As soon as he left, Su Qinghui came in. Although Li Qianxue held the real power in the Li Corporation, Su Qinghui was the nominal president. This was also Li Qianxue's way of showing weakness and currying favor. She believed that she had done everything she could to help Su Qinghui. However, no matter how much she had done, Su Qinghui still didn't care about her. I think there's still a problem with the previous joint venture. Sure enough, he came to look for him only for official business and nothing else. Li Qianxue looked a little unhappy, but she quickly turned her attention to the document in his hand. After talking about business, she saw that Su Qinghui was in a hurry to leave. Li Qianxue stopped him. Anything else? Su Qinghui frowned. Obviously, he didn't want to spend even a minute with Li Qianxue. Li Qianxue gritted her teeth and thought of Su Qingsang. It was the child of the woman Su Qinghui loved the most. Su Qingsang seems to be in trouble recently. You, trouble? Su Qinghui frowned, but he soon calmed down. What kind of trouble? Little troublemaker. Li Qianxue stared at his face. Aren't you going to do something? What? Su Qinghui looked at her face. What do you want me to do? I thought you didn't like me caring about her. Li Qianxue felt like laughing. She stood up and walked around the table to Su Qinghui. I don't like it when you care about her. But you're just going to listen to me? I want you to love me. Why don't you? Su Qinghui avoided her hand and said expressionlessly, What are you trying to say? Li Qianxue's hand missed. She felt suffocated and withdrew her hand. Her voice was slightly cold. I don't want to say anything. I just wanted to tell you that Su Qingsang is in trouble. I'm done. I'm done. Li Qianxue nodded. Su Qinghui turned around and left without hesitation. She felt terrible, and her heart was throbbing in pain. Su Qinghui, don't let me know that your indifference is just an excuse to protect her. If you don't do anything, I'll just ask Su Qingsang to leave Lin City. If you really dare to protect her, then I definitely won't let you off just like that. Su Qingsang and Hua Jinmiao had lunch together. It was already the beginning of autumn, but the weather was still warm. Hua Jinmiao held Su Qingsang's hand and got into the car. I'm free this afternoon. Do you want to go look at the car with me? There's no need for that, right? Of course. Hua Jinmiao didn't give her a chance to refuse. You also said that there are times when your time doesn't match up with mine. It would be more convenient to buy a car. Seeing his persistence, Su Qingsang didn't know what to say. Don't push yourself too hard. Cars can take their time. I can take the subway too. Honey, are you feeling sorry for me? Honey, I'm so touched. Hua Jinmiao reached out and held her in his arms. Honey, you're the best. You're the best. Chapter 133. She didn't feel bad for him. She just felt that there was no need to force it. After all, hundreds of thousands was not a small amount. Seeing her expression, Hua Jinmiao suddenly smiled and leaned over, giving her a big kiss on the cheek. All right, honey, I know you care about me. But don't worry, your husband will work hard. Hua Jinmiao. What should she say? She really didn't feel bad for him. His chest is very bright, he always smiles when he talks. A warm chest and a warm smile. Su Qingsang stayed in his arms, unable to say anything. Honey, don't worry. Whether it is a car or a house, I will give it to you through my own efforts. Honey, I'll definitely let you live a good life. I'll give you what others have. Su Qingsang was stunned for a moment. She stared at Hua Jinmiao's face, which was so close to hers, in a daze. She didn't care about material things, but she was touched by his thoughts. Her heart trembled slightly. She lowered her eyes and hid her thoughts. I'm fine. I don't care about that. But I want to give it to you. Hua Jinyao held her hand tightly. I want to give you the best. His focused expression made Su Qingsang's heart skip a beat again. Hua Jinyao leaned over and kissed her cheek again. Honey, do you realize that I'm even more handsome now? Su Qingsang put her hand on her forehead and suddenly realized that there was some miscommunication. Did you find that you've begun to fall in love with me? Hua Jinyao moved closer to her again. The look on his face made her speechless. Hurry up and drive. Su Qingsang couldn't take it anymore. All right. Let's go now. Hua Jinyao explained his plan. By the way, wife. After that, we can go to a movie. There are a lot of new movies coming out recently. I don't have to work anyway. Just treat it as a stroll. But, all right. Just consider it as accompanying me. As the car drove away, Su Qingsang looked out of the window at the passing street view, and the corners of her mouth suddenly turned up. Su Qingsang was willing to buy another car that cost about 100,000 yuan, but Hua Jinyao refused. Finally, he picked a Cadillac. Hua Jinyao, I don't think it's appropriate for me to drive this car to the hospital. The chief's car wasn't as good as hers. What would people think if she drove such a car to work? This car's performance is better than the one you just picked. Don't try to save money for me. Don't worry, I said I'll work hard. Hua Jinyao didn't know what to say. It was just a car that cost a few 100,000. If it weren't for the fact that he didn't want to scare Su Qingsang, he wouldn't have bought such a cheap car for her. Su Qingsang looked at Hua Jinyao's profile and couldn't bring herself to say no. Why don't you drive this one? Anyway, you're someone who has to run business outside every day. With this car, I'll look good too. Honey. Hua Jinyao squeezed her hand. I didn't even give you a betrothal gift when we got married. Don't think too much about it. Just take this car as a betrothal gift. After listening to him for a long time, Su Qingsang finally stopped struggling. After looking at the car, he said that he would pick it up the next day. Hua Jinyao took Su Qingsang to the movies. For the whole day, Su Qingsang was accompanied by Hua Jinyao. She didn't think about Zhang Mei, the farce in the hospital, or the news on Weibo. Therefore, she didn't know that Hua Jinyao had sent and received several messages while she was not looking. Chapter 134. Early the next morning, a well-known local blogger revealed the truth on Weibo, saying that he was an insider, and revealed the true story of the pregnant woman jumping off the building. Zhang Mei's husband's surname was Li. His name was Li Jiaxing. Li Jiaxing and Zhang Mei already had 2 daughters. I've always wanted a son. When Zhang Mei was pregnant, Li Jiaxing's mother, who was also Zhang Mei's mother-in-law, specially found a fortune teller to tell that it was a son. Although the Li family was unhappy about his fall, they thought that he was their grandson, so they let it go. Who knew that when Zhang Mei went for a routine checkup last night, her mother-in-law happened to come and overheard the conversation of 2 other patients in the same room. They said that judging from Zhang Mei's belly, it should be a girl. They were just chatting casually, but Zhang Mei's grandmother took it to heart. The more she looked at Zhang Mei's belly, the more it looked like she was carrying a girl. The next morning, the more Zhang Mei's grandmother thought about it, the more suspicious she became. She went to ask another doctor who had examined Zhang Mei yesterday. She took Zhang Mei's ultrasound report and asked if it was a boy or a girl. Of course, the doctor refused to say. He only said that the hospital had a rule not to reveal the gender of the fetus. However, the more the doctor behaved like this, the more Zhang Mei's grandmother believed him. After she believed that Zhang Mei was pregnant with a girl, she didn't like Zhang Mei anymore. Especially when he thought that Zhang Mei would have to stay in the hospital to keep the baby safe. Not only would she have to spend money, but she would also be giving birth to a daughter. After thinking about it, she discussed it with Li Jiaxing and decided to let Zhang Mei induce labor. Zhang Mei refused. She had been pregnant for nearly 7 months. She refused to induce the labor just like that. In the end, she had an impulse with Li Jiaxing and Mrs. Li Du's mother pushed Zhang Mei in excitement. Zhang Mei fell to the ground. All the patients in the ward at the time could testify, and they even took photos and a short video. Zhang Mei had already fallen yesterday, and she fell again today. Of course, the child couldn't be saved. When she heard that it was a girl, Li Du's mother felt that it was a good and wonderful abortion. She turned around and asked Zhang Mei to go back and have another baby. Zhang Mei was forced to jump off a building because she had lost her child and couldn't bear the pressure. She jumped off the building. Li Jiaxing's mother was dumbfounded. However, she felt indignant. Later, she was egged on by someone and decided to come to the hospital to make a scene. The long blog post not only had witnesses, but also photos as evidence. As soon as this article was published, the internet was in an uproar. The people who were scolding the hospital yesterday all turned around and scolded Li Jiaxing and Mrs. Li today. Especially when the video of Li Du's mother scolding Zhang Mei and asking her to induce labor was released, the public's opinion swung to one side. At the same time, photos of Li Jiaxing bringing people to the hospital to make trouble yesterday were also posted on the internet. Su Qingsang had been with Hua Jinmiao the whole day yesterday. Naturally, he didn't know that the direction of the news had changed. That night, Hua Jinmiao pestered her for most of the night. The guy used the excuse that she didn't have to go to work the next day and could rest at home to fully exercise his rights as a husband. When Su Qingsang woke up in the morning, her back was still sore, and her legs felt weak. When she saw Hua Jinmiao's satisfied expression, she couldn't help but bury her face in the quilt. "Honey." Hua Jinmiao sat down on the bed, feeling refreshed. "You don't have to work today. Where do you want to go?" "I'm not going anywhere." Su Qingsang's voice was muffled by the blanket. Hua Jinmiao reached out his hand to pull the quilt, but Su Qingsang held it down hard and didn't let him take it. Chapter 135. Su Qingsang poked her head out of the quilt and glared at him. How could she not be angry? She kept saying that she couldn't take it anymore and that she didn't want him to come again. But what did he do? "I'm sorry." Hua Jinmiao held her tightly and put her on his lap. "I couldn't control myself yesterday." Su Qingsang didn't want to talk to him. How could that be called not controlling himself? He didn't control himself at all. She pouted, her face full of anger, and her cheeks flushed red. She looked really cute. Hua Jinmiao couldn't help but lean over and give her another heavy kiss on the lips. "Honey, don't worry. I'll control myself tonight." Who would believe him? Su Qingsang turned her face away. This person had no credibility with her. "But you can't blame me." Hua Jinmiao looked at her shoulder under the quilt. "My wife is so beautiful and delicious. It's normal that I can't control myself. Right? Delicious?" Did he think she was a food? Su Qingsang wanted to bite him. "Honey, don't be angry." Hua Jinmiao put his hand on the back of her waist. "How about I give you a massage?" "No." Su Qingsang finally opened her mouth. But even these two simple words were hoarse. It showed how outrageous this guy was yesterday. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but want to glare at him again. Hua Jinmiao looked like he was begging for mercy. "Okay. Don't be angry. Do you want me to let you hit me?" Su Qingsang ignored him. "Let me go. I want to sleep." "Honey." Hua Jinmiao put his arms around her waist. "Think about it. The weather is so good and you don't go to work. Isn't it a waste for us to stay at home? Do you want to go out and play?" "No." "Go out and play? Where to play?" In her current state, she would be tired if she took 2 more steps. Honey, Hua Jinyao wanted to persuade Su Qingsang, but her phone rang. Su Qingsang's hand was wrapped in the quilt. Hua Jinyao helped her take the phone. When he saw the name on the screen, he wanted to hang up. Give it to me. Su Qingsang had already reached out her hand. Hua Jinyao didn't give her the phone. Instead, he put it on speaker after answering. Su Qingsang glared at him. She really didn't want to argue with him over such a trivial matter. Qingsang. Zhua Hongshan was on the other end of the line. Even through the phone, Su Qingsang could hear the concern in his voice. Senior brother? Where are you now? I'm at home. Su Qingsang's voice was still a little hoarse. She cleared her throat and tried to take the phone. Hua Jinyao refused to give it to her and kept holding it. Su Qingsang could not help but roll her eyes at him. Have you seen the news? What news? The hospital's news. It's about Zhang Mei. Zhua Hongshan knew that the hospital was innocent, but he didn't expect it to be solved so quickly. Zhang Mei. Su Qingsang wanted to take out her phone to see what was going on, but Zhua Hongshan didn't give her time. If you have time, you can look at it later. Come to the hospital now. To the hospital? Now? Yes. Hurry up, the hospital will be holding a press conference later. You still have to attend. Press conference? Su Qingsang hung up the phone. Ignoring Hua Jinyao's expression, she picked up her phone and began to search for news. When she finished reading all the scandals, news, and Weibo articles, she was completely stunned. How was that possible? Such a bad thing was solved by a Weibo article? You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.